Hello, and welcome to the BYU Family History Library webinar series. We're glad you could join us today. I'm Olivia Tueller, and I'll be your host for this webinar. If you have technical difficulties during the webinar, please use the chat box and I can address your concerns. You are welcome to use the chat box during the webinar for comments, insights, and questions. However, all questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. Our next webinar is on July 28th with Brian Holdeman. He will be giving a presentation entitled Oral Histories. If you would like to access a previous webinar, please visit our webinar index on our website or search on our YouTube channel. All of our webinars are recorded and uploaded by the following Monday for your convenience. We also post links to recordings and other updates on our Facebook and Twitter accounts. For today's webinar, we are pleased to hear from Maureen Brady, who will be giving a presentation on You Too Can Read Old Handwriting. Before we begin, here is a little bit about Maureen. Maureen Brady, a former school librarian and computer educator, has over 35 years' experience with family history research. She has traced her Scottish roots back to the end of the 17th century and beyond, and has also pursued Chicago and the Midwest, the Trans-Allegheny US, Quebec, Irish, and Swedish research. Maureen has made numerous presentations to Illinois and Wisconsin genealogical societies, libraries, conferences, and workshops, including presenting at the 2002 National Genealogical Society Conference in the States and the 2016, 2017, and 2018 Central Florida Family History Conference. She is a member of the Genealogical Speakers Guild, as well as a life member of the Aberdeen and Northeast Scotland Family History Society, the Chicago Genealogical Society, the Ohio Genealogy Society, and the McHenry County, Illinois Genealogical Society. She is also active in the British Interest Group of Wisconsin and Illinois, the Chicago Scotch Genealogical Group, and the Lake County Genealogical Society. If Maureen is ready, we will turn the time over to her.
Okay, thank you so much, Olivia.
Mm-hmm.
So we're all ready to start. So this I'm going to be doing tonight. I'm not going to be giving you exact how you do it, but rather point you to various resources that would help you read old handwriting. But the first thing, well, first of all, if you take a look at this is from 1732 in Scotland. And yes, it is written in English in something called secretary hand. And we'll talk about that more a little bit later. But that is really, to me, because I'm used to reading it, and that's really what it takes is practice and lots of diving into the records. I can pretty well read every word on this page. But let's first talk about what is old handwriting. What would you consider to be old handwriting? Are you thinking Middle Ages? Are you thinking 18th century? Are you thinking a church register from 1900? What exactly do you feel old handwriting is? And to me, there really are no simple answers. And I received kind of a little bit of a nudge about that. This is a marriage entry in a church register in Monclova, Mexico in 1897. And it is handwritten, of course, and to me, quite beautiful penmanship, very easy to read the letters. But the patron that I was working with, she couldn't read this because she does not know how to read cursive. So for today's younger generation who are not taught cursive writing in school, this would be old handwriting. And that would include anything up to the 1950s, 60s, 70s, whatever, until we got into digital format and into computer records. So it really is not a simple answer. It depends on where you're looking, what research you're doing, what time frame you're working on as to what constitutes old handwriting. But I'm going to try and give you some resources tonight that no matter where you are, you'll be able to find some help. So let's first talk about what I consider the two main places to go for resources and help, starting with Family Search. And I do this because a lot of people aren't aware of a few little things on navigation. So I usually just repeat it so that everybody's aware. When you go to familysearch.org, you get this screen, and it does ask you to sign in up here. And once you've signed in, the screen totally changes. Your screen name is now in the upper right corner. So you know you were signed in and you're ready to research. The other thing I want everyone to be aware of is up here in the upper left, there's the logo for Family Search. And all you need to do is to click that logo, because it's throughout the whole website, to bring you back to this home page if you need to start a new search or go to a different part of the website. So a lot of people don't know that this is a quick navigational way to get back to this page. So we're going to talk about the resources at Family Search for helping you read whatever handwriting you're faced with. And on that main screen, you come up here to the search button. You click that and you get a nice drop down list. And we want to go to the very last one, the Research Wiki, which allows you to get information on every country, states in the United States, provinces in Canada, counties in some cases, such as England and Ireland and Scotland, and various other topics such as handwriting. And with the handwriting, you can just enter the word handwriting and get a list of every resource relating to that. But if you want to make it more specific, you can put in the name of the country or the language and then the word handwriting. So we're just going to do England as an example. And then it takes me to this screen with 4 different reference points. Written accents, which English basically does not have, case comparisons, but the one that you most want for your resources for help is this related articles section in the handwriting of whatever country you're working in. And in there, we get online helps. And here's a list of online helps, including a handwriting guide, 1500 to 1800. Here's a tutorial on English script from Brigham Young University. There's one on English handwriting, 1500 to 1700, and so forth. But as an example, let's just take a look at this tutorial on reading English script. And this is a series of lessons, but it's also a series of charts. So here's the chart. This is in English of the court hand, which was the form of penmanship or handwriting that was taught in the period 1500 to 1700. And some of it is really very, very different, where you have a very hard time trying to figure out what that letter could be. It's in the same order as A, B, C, D, E, F, and so on. But some of this can be quite confusing. Like here we go, F, G, H, I, J. These are Ks, and then L, M, N, and so on. And you have to count the bumps to tell the difference between the M's and the N's. And in this case, the N's have more than the M's. So charts like this really will help you. And I suggest if you need this period of time and you're dealing with English records, that you would print this off so you can have it right next to the record you're working on and be able to compare letters. Now, moving up a little bit to the 17th and 18th century, this is 16 and 1700s. Secretary hand was the one most often used. And again, it starts with the A and goes down to the Z, but you can see how different some of these letters are. Some of them taking more of the form we are more used to today, such as the H and the K, but some of it is a little still confusing. And again, there's sometimes more for one letter than the other. Look at your 3 different forms of Q now. And then you come to R, and unless you really knew that was an R, it'd be hard to say that's R. So again, I would print this and have it handy to put next to my document to be able to read it. When you're reading these early documents, it almost becomes imperative that you get a hard copy of it that you can lay on the table next to your charts, and also to use it for tracing. And we'll talk about that later. So here is a church register. This is also on that online resources under tutorials. And this is a church register. You can see the date, 1599 to 1601. And it appears to be baptisms, if you can read it. Now, this is very, very difficult because it's in the court hand. But one of the things that this website and these references and resources will give you is the transcription of what is being said here. So you can look at a word, then look where it is on the page and begin to learn how those letters would work together to be the word you're looking for. So here we have a John and son and so on, and you would be able to match it to the John, son of up here. And it actually is, this is the match to here. So there's Elizabeta, Thelia Rogers. So Elizabeth daughter, because it's in Latin, Roger Brebent. And if you come here, here's Elizabeth, Thelia, Roger, and then the rest of it's hidden. But these tutorials are excellent practice, but they are also excellent ways for you to compare letters to what you can figure out for known words. So if you were looking for a Richard in this time frame, you would find it here in the list where it actually was, and then you would have an idea of what it actually looked like. So when you're scanning through records, you would be able to look better for that Richard. There's also a very neat practice emphasis here, a place to practice. There is an easy, medium, and hard level. This is the easy level, and it gives you a document here. And then down here, it asks you to transcribe it. And you would start at the beginning, and I started to transcribe it. And as long as I was correct, it would remain in black font. So I got the Dorothy Chicken 14th correct with a period. But then when I went to April and started to type April, it now turned everything red to tell me that that's not an A up here, that there's perhaps something in front of the A. So it's a good practice document, and you can go back to it over and over and over, especially as you get better in this. You could move up to the medium or the hard if you wanted to. I love this little practice piece. It's really wonderful. And then we have for the Scottish handwriting, which is actually different than English, there is also a link to those Scottish tutorials, including a 1-hour basic tutorial and then how various records look. And here an example is the letter E as it was used in the 1600s, 17th century. And here's the letter S in the same time frame. These look like O's to me at first glance, but they are E's. And this is an S at the beginning of a word. This is S at the middle or end. And so it tells you here, this is the word scandalous. And you can see how the D's have these big tall tails that tip forward and so on. Great resources, again, for comparison, but also for practice. So that's English, just a little bit of what's on that website if you go to the wiki and work through all the links that are on the wiki. Now let's take a look at German, because a lot of people in the United States have German ancestry, and the German records go back far enough, this really becomes an issue. So under German handwriting, it has, again, 4 contents. There's handwriting examples and tools, and here's the first one, which shows just one upper and one lowercase. The main letter, that how it should look within the German alphabet. You can see including the umlauted A's, O's, and U's. But there's other things here as well to look your way through. And one of the neat things to me is a script generator tool. So it opens up to this, and it's on this website. It's Alte Deutsch Handschriften, and I know I'm murdering that. But you don't have to worry about writing it down, because it's a link directly on the Germany handwriting wiki page in Family Search. So I typed the word Gasthaus or Gasthaus, and then hit this little arrow, and it writes it in this early German script for me, and then also tells it again to me in today's German printed. But this word is how that word would look in the written document in the earlier German script. I find this very, very helpful, because if I'm trying to figure out what somebody did for a living, and I think I can figure out that it maybe is a G-A-S-T, or I can figure out that's an H here and maybe an E on the end or something, I could do some guessing and write that word here And then it would show it to me again for comparison. Do I have that? Is that the word I'm looking for? It will also do names, both given and surnames. And if you take a look at this one, I did gross as an example. And while I can maybe figure out that this is a double S, O double S, when I read that as an R and when I read that as a G, on first glance, probably not. So I can even put given names or surnames over here and it will do the same thing, show it to me in that early German script. So this script generator tool is very, very handy. Then they have a whole bunch of downloadable handouts for German handwriting. These are all at the wiki on Family Search. There's the German word list, and we'll talk about that later, the word lists. Then current letters, marriage, what a marriage record would look like, an alphabet of old German script, more than what I showed you on the first one, spelling variations, and then the Fracture font, which was a different font used at a different time frame. But if I go to the spelling variations in German names and place names, it's a chart showing the letters over here, and then what it could be actually in a spelling when spelling wasn't all that important. So A could be O, and U could be O, and Y could be an umlauted U, and so on. So this is, again, an entire chart that you can take and print out and keep with your records, and then have it to compare to when you're working through a document. It's much longer than what I'm showing you here on the screen. There is also a link to a German paleography seminar. Now, paleography is the official word for handwriting, and it is 10 lessons long. There's the first 4. So there's introduction, the alphabet, websites, and then keywords, plus 6 more lessons. These are video lessons. All of them are on the BYU site, and you can get to them through the wiki on Family Search as well. And you can also search for them on the YouTube for BYU. But this is 10 lessons that walk you through it and give you some more hints, tips, and so on. If this were a German one, this would be what I would be showing you. But since this isn't strictly German, I'm just showing you how to find it. All right, then another resource I use a lot is Cindy's List, which is cindyslist.com. And I believe I gave that to you on your, yes, it's cindyslist.com/handwriting. But if you go to Cindy's List itself, you just scroll down, choose H for handwriting, and then we get this screen. And there are major categories of references here. Now at Cindy's, these are all websites that she's identified and then categorized by subject matter. So we have general resources and so on. Then there also are some related categories for diaries, dictionaries, even reading family Bibles and so on. But we're going to only look at 2 of these, general resources and locality specific. So under general resources, we have an entire section on deciphering old handwriting, how a leading S looks, places of birth, proper names, occupations. Occupations is a key one to be able to get hold of. And then there's a reference from Find My Past. There's a transcriber practice if you want to do that every day. There's something from Genealogy Magazine. And there's even interpreting the symbols and abbreviations in 17th century, which is 1600s, 17th century English and American documents. Now, if you take a look at this one, examples of letters in 17th century parish registers, then you get this chart. It's the key, it's the main forms of the letter that you're going to find. Now, it's not 100% complete, but it's the most likely letter forms you're going to find in the 17th century. And we've got it all the way from A to Z, and you can see the capitals and then the small are at the end of each line. Again, something you can print out and have to lay next to a document to help you transcribe it and figure out what's being said. Under locality specific, there's an entire page on German, but in addition to that, we've got Norwegian Gothic. This is an entire lesson on from the the National Archives in Norway on how to read Norwegian. Then we've got Swedish. We have Scottish, which is that early secretary hand, and another one on Scottish, Spanish, and then 2 on Old German Handwriting by Catherine Schober. And she has them divided into 10 tips and 10 more tips. And then we've got even something on Dutch. So it isn't just necessarily English and German. There are other resources. They just aren't as prevalent. Google will also work to help you find some of these resources. So when I look at my other resources that I could use, certainly hardbound or paperback books are going to be useful. And the 5 that have been most useful to me, now this is my own personal judgment, it's not from anybody's list. Excuse me, but these are books that I have used at the Family History Center when I've been helping patrons. So and they are in your handout, there is a small bibliography of some of these suggested books that you may wish to get for your own library. This Decipher Germanic Records, If I Can, You Can. This one is a spiral bound. It's extremely useful. It falls apart at our center, so we have to keep kind of putting it back together because it gets so much use. Kip Sperry's Early American is considered to be the source for early American handwriting. There's one here on English very early on. Then one on German church records. This is one of Catherine Schober's books. And then there's even one on colonial handwriting. So these are not, if you need them, I would recommend these as a start for your library if you are in the mind to start developing a library. If you are looking for just one and you're working in German, I would absolutely say it's this one. If I Can, You Can, Decipher German Records. If you're working in colonial America, I would go with Kip Sperry's book here. And if you're way back into English records before the Reformation and you're dealing with the old Latin records, then I would definitely choose this one up here. Okay, let's talk about some strategies. First of all, and this is going to be developed over time. You're not going to learn any of this the first time out. You're going to have to practice. You're going to have to keep going back into the records. The more you learn, the easier it's going to be. And the easier it's going to be to have some of these hints and strategies work for you. So one of them is language patterns. As we go back in time, the words we use for particular situations, even in our birth, marriage, and death records, have changed. And they sometimes change by centuries, and sometimes it's changed by region. It all depends on where you're working, where the records are, and was it a priest? Was it a schoolmaster? Was it an official government recorder? Who did it? If it was a priest or minister, it is more likely to have some vernacular in it. If it is a schoolmaster, he is more well, he's not more educated than a minister, but it prides himself on his education, so he tends to be more educated in his handwriting. And certainly government recorders were very, very standardized because they were following government patterns. So here's a couple of examples. This is from Scotland, and this is a common form of an English record in the, a marriage record in the church registers of Scotland in the 17th, 18th, and early 19th century, but mostly 17th and 18th. And it tells us that John Thou and Jean Ross compeered before the session. Now, the first time you read that, you kind of go, what in the world is that telling me? But the earlier form of the word appear was compeer. So John Thou and Jean Ross appeared before the session to declare their banns for marriage, which is the rest of it. So this is what I'm talking about. If a word doesn't make sense within the context of what you're reading, or that particular word makes sense to me, but in a different kind of context, then you want to kind of explore, maybe do some Google searching on the word to see what the older version of that word could be. Now, something like the Oxford English Dictionary and dictionary.com online do have a lot of these older uses for the word, which helps very much in learning these earlier patterns. Then another thing to do is to enlarge and trace, and I call that let your fingers do the walking. Not with a pencil or pen, actually use your finger for this, which is another reason why I suggest you do a hard copy that you can lay on a table to do the tracing. But take a look at this record. This is another part of the page that I was showing you on my title slide. And this says 1732. You can read that rather easily, but come on down here, and there's 3 words here. Take a look at that and see if you can decipher it, if you can figure out what that says. It's a baptismal entry. I'll give you that much of a hint. I'll give you a couple of seconds. Well, if you can't read it, then you enlarge it. And then with your finger, though I'm going to do it with the mouse, you would trace this just like this. And as you trace it, you begin to feel how that word was written and how it matches what we have today. So if I'm writing his today, I wouldn't put a little loop there, but I would come down here and do my hump, and then come up and do my I, and then my S. So the word is his. Own is pretty easy. And how now we have an H here that we can compare to this H. So we know that is the word letter H. And then we have O, U, and then we have this very odd letter here with this little squiggle. So this is when you pull out your alphabet comparison sheets and you discover that this is one form of the letter S in this time frame. And then because it's at the end of a letter of a word, this particular recorder has put the E above the line to indicate that that's the end. So this is house with an S-E. It's really not that hard to do. And once you trace it with your finger, it really becomes quite easy because you go H-O-U, well, this would be S. And then you look at your chart and you go, yes, that is an S. And so H-O-U-S, well, E probably. So that's how you can kind of read these. So you enlarge and trace. And then what is your finger telling you? And does that look like a letter that matches the chart? So here's the family search word list. Now, family search in the wiki has all kinds of various references that can help you. But the word list is always important because if you don't know what the word should be, how can you decipher what the handwriting is telling you? So on the wiki, in the search box, you're going to type genealogical word list. Those 3 words in that order. You hit your search button. And now you get a list of all of these genealogical word lists that Family Search has put together and put online. The last count I saw, there were 82 of these with a rather long list around the world of various places that you wouldn't even think about having word lists. I saw one for Afrikaans, and I saw one for Indonesian. Those 2 come to my mind from the 82 that I saw, but they are not in alphabetical order. So you do need to scan your way through it, looking for the list you want. So let's look at the Poland genealogical word list as an example of what this resource can provide for you. And this is not just a help for handwriting. This is also a help for printed documents such as newspapers in the 20th century, or church records that have been transcribed and so on. So you go to it, it starts out with an outline of what is included. It does show you where Poland is, if you didn't know. there is a downloadable form of everything that's going to be here, and it's in a PDF file. So you can download it as a PDF file, save it to your computer, or what I've done for the ones that I need is I've printed it, double-sided, and then I have a little 3-ring binder that I keep them in on my desk so I can pull them down very quickly when I need them. The Polish one is around 95 pages. Some of them are smaller, some of them are larger, but they're all PDF, and it makes it very, very easy to access it. So you can see we've got alphabetical order and so forth. So let's take a look at part of it. Language characteristics. So how the word old is used when it's a man or a woman or a city. So you can see the spelling changes a little bit. And then we have the variants for the word died for he, she, or it, the child. So they're giving you some variants of some of the common endings or spellings for some of the changes that words may make. Then we have another one, which is variant forms of words, which are the singular and plural. So city singular, city plural, and so on. Up here, plural forms generally, if it's an A in the end, it goes to a Y. If it ends in an O, it goes to an A, which really can be confusing. And if it's a Y or an I, sometimes that's added as the plural. So if you have an A at the end, is that the plural for O or is that the singular for Y? You'd have to decide, but you would know at least it's one or the other. So you have variant forms of words. Then we have the keywords. That is the words that we are looking for when we are looking through church registers and civil documents and so on. So birth, burial, Catholic, and so forth. There's the English word we're looking for. And here's the Polish word that would be the word for that. You can see that death has several different forms of the word for death. Same thing for marriage, and same thing for Protestant. And the actual difference here is evangelical, Reformed, or just Lutheran or Protestant. So there's 4 versions there. 2 different words for the word year, but these are the key ones that you're looking for. It does show you little in the dots and all of that, so you can find them. Now, again, you would want to have your document. Then maybe you need an alphabet chart to compare to. And then when you think you have figured out a word, then you come to this word list. And does that word make sense for what you're reading? Is that a word even in the Polish language? Another one is all how the numbers are written. So here's cardinal, 1 through 20, then 1st through 20th. And then there's 2 different ways to do that. So it might be written this way, or it might be written this way. That's that Y-O. And then we have the 1 through 20. And then if you really work at it, you would know that for 21, you would go the 20 plus the 1 and so on. So you've got your numbers. And then you have an actual A to Z little dictionary with the words that are most likely to appear in the birth, marriage, and death records. So we have the Polish word on the left, and then the English translation on the right. And you can see some of these are actually occupations, like here's a dispensing chemist, and that's you can almost see apothecary there. Here's a leaseholder or innkeeper, and so on. This is A through Z. It goes on quite a ways. As I said, it's about 92 pages for the Polish word list. Very, very handy and very easy to download, print off, and then keep it on your desk. One of the other things you have to remember as you move back in time, and not too far back in time, even early 20th century records, spelling doesn't count. If the word looks like today's version, if the word pronounces like today's version, then it's probably the right word. So 4 different versions of the word brown, the name Brown, in English and German. But you would need to be able to know that, okay, if I'm looking for this word 20th century, but I've gone back to 1900 and I'm at a German Catholic church in Chicago, I may find it spelled this way because the priest reads, writes, and speaks German, and he writes his records in German. Now, the family, the name in English is going to be spelled this way. This is maybe what shows up on the census or the civil registration, such as the World War I draft registration, because the family is choosing to use an English spelling of their name. But the priest, because he speaks German and it's a German language family, he chooses to use a German form. So don't discount because it isn't a match. As long as it looks or pronounces similar to the name you're looking for, it very well could be the same name. When you are just transcribing and looking at actual records, decipher and transcribe as is. This is very important when you're going to share, because don't put in your own interpretations. Put in what you think it is. No, put it in as it is, or what you think it's saying. You may be making some mistakes on your transcription, but at least give it a try. So once you've done that, and you have a word you're not at all sure what it is, especially if you're working in a foreign language, say it out loud as you think it might be said, and then write down what you're hearing, and then translate from that. Now, this isn't a 100% foolproof method, but it will help a lot when you're trying to decipher. And I'll show you an example later on from one of my letters that I have that we're going to practice with, how this would work. And then when you get into church records, you want to look for similar letters on the same page. Excuse me, written by the same recorder. Now, it's important you're looking at the same person's handwriting. Sometimes in church records, if they have more than one priest or more than one minister, you're going to have two different handwritings or three different handwritings on the same page. There's one in Chicago for the early St. Mary's, where if the family was English speaking, we had one priest recording it. If the family was Irish, there was another recorder. If the family was German, there was another recorder. And if the family was French, there was another recorder. And so on the same page, you might have four different handwritings. So when you're looking for your similar letters, be sure you're looking at the same hand created, but you're looking at similar letters. So here's that same 1732 record that I was showing you earlier. And up here, we have called Christian after Christ. And then this is very common in very early records, or 18th century even as well. When they get to the end of the line, they've run out of space, they just stop the word and then continue on the next line. There's no breaking down by syllables. They don't put dashes. They just go as far as they can and then continue on the next line. So Christian is one word. Now, sometimes, of course, it's going to be two, but in this case, Christian is one. So how would you tell? How would you decide, is that one or two? Because Chris could be a standalone name. But if you come down to the beginning of the next line, one of the things I said it will say is, does it make sense? T-I-A-N as a standalone name. Not impossible, certainly, but not likely. So now I'm going to look to what was before it, and I see Chris Chun, and that is definitely a given name for a girl in this period of time in Scotland. And then we have meadow, and then we have this word right here. And what is that word? Well, I can see L-I-C-K, maybe E-C-K, but what are these two letters? So when I'm saying compare, you take a look at the rest of the page, looking for something that looks like that. And if I come down here, even though this is different handwriting, a different recorder, he's still using the same alphabet. So I'm looking at this, and that looks to be the same first letter as the first letter up here. So if I blow those up, remember I said enlarge and trace. Well, if I trace this one first, I go like that, and that is the letter R, and then it's OSS. Well, if this is the letter R here, I'll come up here and do the same thing with an extra scribble, but we have, he's kind of going like this, but then we come down, and this part is exactly the same. So it is an R. And then if we look at that alphabet chart, we will see that this is very often an E in this time frame. So if I'm doing this, I would still think it's an O, but if I look at my chart, I realize that's the early form of E. So I have R, E, and then my L, and this could be an I or an E, but it isn't an E because it doesn't match this. So it's an I, C, and this is a K. Relic, meaning widow. So I enlarged, traced, compared to a chart, and I was able to figure out that this is the word relic, meaning she was the widow of the person mentioned next. You transcribe it as you see it, though. You don't change that to the word widow. When you're transcribing it, you transcribe it as you see it. And then if you wish to later on, you can add a note saying, changing it to the word you would have used. Then we want to look at collateral research. This is often how you solve some of it as well. So here are two baptismal entries, both from the parish of Ford, which is in Scotland. And the year is, this is mid-19th century, so they're fairly modern and new. So we have here Alexander McIntosh in, and this is a place name, which I'm not sure what place name that would be. It looks like it's Mooralehoun. And then it had a son baptized, believe it or not, that's the word baptized. Or no, I'm sorry, it had a son by his wife, Jane Christie, and so on. Well, I'm trying to figure out exactly what that place name is. So I'm going to go look at the other, this is the person I'm looking for. But if I'm looking for others, if I go to the siblings of this one, then I see down here a different spelling. And if I enlarge that, again, to the enlargement, now I can trace it. So we have M-U-I-R-A-L-E, and then an H-O-U. You can see the U better when it's blown up. S, and there's the E at the end. So more modern, Muir Ale House. Former version is More Ale House. You can see, however, that that is exactly the same location, probably. And when you transcribe, you use this spelling on the one and this spelling on the other with a note, perhaps, to when you put this one in with a note saying that later it became spelled this way. Earlier, believe it or not, this was actually two words, Muir Ellis. They changed to Muir Ale House in this format. Finally, by the 1860s, it became Muir Ale House. So you can trace these down, and you also get a little bit of history of the development of a given place name this way. Put it in your notes, keep track of it, because it may come in handy at some point. Census records. These are always fun because they're always handwritten. So first you want to, again, as you were working in the church records, look for your similar letters or words. And also, as we were doing with church records, does it make sense? So here's a page And we have over here where they're living and the usual, the names and so on. And here we have occupations. So let's take a look at one and I'm going to blow it up for you. So we have carpenter's wife, house servant. Servant is pretty clear and house isn't too bad. And then we have DO, which means ditto. That they didn't want to spell out the word ditto, like we don't spell out the word ditto, so they just use DO. So this person is also a house servant. Now, I have had patrons come in who said, well, this person's occupation was DO, and I don't know what that means. Did it make sense? Does that kind of an occupation make sense? And most of us would say, no, it doesn't. It's ditto. We would use little like quotation marks sometimes, but that's what that is. And then we have a journeyman right down here. Now, when I'm saying does it make sense, here's another one from that same census year. We have a plowman, an aura man, and a domestic servant. Well, plowman makes sense. Domestic servant makes sense. But am I interpreting this correctly as ORRAMAN? This is where the word lists come in handy. And if you can't find it on the word list, then my go-to is Google. And when I do that, dictionary.com tells me that it can be as 2 words or one, and it means an odd job man, and it's used in Scotland. So sometimes Google is your answer, but first read it and then ask yourself, does this make sense or do I have any clue what this might mean? And then you start working on the word list and Google searches. Become familiar with place names. I cannot emphasize this enough. Get the maps. And the older the map, the better, especially if you're looking in old records. Try to find a map online, and there's a lot of them now that are from the time period where you're working in the records, because you want to be familiar with those place names. So again, here's that same page of a census. And over here we have birthplaces. In Scotland, they put the birthplace, county, and parish. And the very first one up here, if I blow it up for you, it says Bamshire. And then what in the world is that say? Well, one of the nice things about Family Search, in the catalog, if I put in the name of the county, in this case, Scotland, Bamshire, then it tells me there's a little click arrow here that I can see the list of places within Bamshire. So if I click that, I get this chart, this little list really, of all of the parishes within Bamshire. And I take a look, here's what I'm trying to read. And I come down to the R's, and here's Rothiemay, ROTHIEMAY. So when I have an idea, I'll come up and trace it. And does that seem to match? This is in Family Search in the catalog, where you can put in the name of a county and it'll give you the places within that county. Very useful. And then my last strategy is, when all else fails, use another pair of eyes. Ask the person next to you or the person across from you, or just any old person at all that you can have access to come and look at it too and see how they read it. Because sometimes they see something totally different than you do, either because they're more experienced with that handwriting, or they just have other kind of defaults with the way they read things. So that's the strategies. Now let's do some practice. Excuse me again. So here's the first one, and I'm giving you an easy one to start with. This is a baptismal register from Holy Name Cathedral in Chicago. And I want you to take a look at the top line. I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to see what you think that top line says. This one's easy, so I'm not going to give you much time. So is this what you figured out? Thomas Maurice, son of Martin O'Connor and Margaret O'Donnell. Now you notice I transcribed as is. I did not put any other words into it. I did not spell out Margaret. This is my transcription, and then in the notes, I could then say in parentheses, Thomas Maurice, son of Martin O'Connor, and Margaret O'Donnell. That becomes a note, but when I'm transcribing it, it is as is. Here's another one. This is a Polish record, marriage record from St. Stanislaus Kostka, also in Chicago. And I want you to look at just this much of it. I'm not asking you to translate all these Polish words, but the name up here, and then what is this right here? You probably have to guess that. That one is not too hard. So did you guess Michael Januszewski, age 22? And then his bride, oh, I'm sorry, his parents are listed here. This means son of, and there's the parents. So I'll give you a second for that one. And did you write Joseph and Barbara, maiden surname Pizarnik? Now, this is not a transcription. This is my English translation of what's being said up here. If I were transcribing it, I would have to transcribe it exactly as it appears, but this is my translation. So you see the difference between a transcription and a translation. And you also notice that Josepha ends with what appears to be an A. So don't make an assumption based on that final letter that that is a male or a female, because it is the word Joseph. All right, here's a letter. This is from my great-great-grandfather to one of his brothers who was living in Nova Scotia, and it was dated 1 May, 1855. Very newsy 4 pages about the family and where everybody was and what they were doing. And you can read through it a little bit, but what I want you to look at is this one right there. And remember, I was saying, say it out loud. And then what do you hear? So take a look at that. Say it out loud, just the way it looks, without interpreting what you think it says. Say it out loud to yourself. Now, I'll give you one hint. If you look at the word oldest, you can see how the D is formed with this little tail going to the left. And the same thing is true of this letter and this letter, and also the D in lady. So we know that this is the letter D and that is the letter D. So now try it. Is this what you said, what you figured out? The oldest is in gold diggins. If you say gold diggins, do you hear the word gold diggings? D-I-G-G-I-N-S. He is a learned person. He can read and write, but his spelling is very, well, not unique. Remember, spelling doesn't count. So the word diggings to him is spelled D-I-G-E-N-S or D-E-G, I'm not sure here. And if you say that out loud, you can almost hear the word diggings. And in fact, this is referring to a nephew who was in Australia prospecting for gold. So when you say it, and maybe sometimes close your eyes after you've said it and repeat it again, then you begin to hear what that word is actually telling you. And one more, this is a baptismal entry from that same page we started out with. And it's not hard to read if you take a moment to really look at it. So we're not going to spend too much time because we're running out. So in 1732, October 16th, this is a transcription, not a translation and not a rewritten. This is the transcription. The said day being on Monday, Mr. Alexander Ross, schoolmaster, had a daughter baptized in his own house by the minister who was called Jean. Hopefully you can get most of that as I read through it. So good luck in your research. We have time for a couple of questions if there are any. I always feel like either I went too fast and so you have no idea what to ask, or I was so good you don't know what to ask, one of the two. But the wiki to me is your go-to place first. Start there to get your resources, then go to Cindy for any others that she may have links to. And I cannot emphasize the best way I have found to do it is print things off and have them as a reference for you to use right on your table, your desk, that you can compare right away. And you're not flipping screens. I know people like to split screens and things, but it doesn't seem to work as well, at least for me. Thank you so much, Olivia, for having me tonight. And hope everyone got quite a bit out of this.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you will join us for our next webinar, which is on Thursday, July 28th with Brian Holteman. He will be giving a presentation entitled Oral Histories. A recording of this webinar will be made available next week. You can view that on our YouTube channel or on our website. If you have any comments or questions, you can always email us at fhl_webinars@byu.edu or follow Facebook and Twitter. Thank you and have a wonderful week.